Thank you. Thank you, Yotam, for a great invitation. And I'm really pleased and happy to be in touch again with each one of you, and I welcome each one of you for this session. As you can see on the screen, and I would say that the PDF of this PowerPoint and whatever documents I will mention will be available through Yotam and the GA group for distribution. And in due course, it will be attached to the recording as well. I was invited to talk about letters. And then I realized, given all these places I've been and Yotam mentioned, there is a big confusion about what is a letter, what are these letters we are asked to provide or ask third parties to submit. Not only is the confusion great, but actually most of us, most of the students for that matter, think they don't have to worry about them because they will just ask somebody else to do it and they will do what needs to be done. What I would like to propose today is a change of attitudes. I would argue, and this would be the main kind of argument that would drive through this presentation, that the letters that we ask, and I will be talking to the different kinds of letters, are so central that actually thinking about submitting a proposal should always take into account the letters that we are asking in the first priority of things. And I hope that as the presentations goes forward, we can clarify that issue. It is now 12:40. I will try to talk about until 1:30, and then open it up for conversations. Okay, so I would like to start with explaining what a letter is and what does it do. And I emphasize the word to do, the verb to do. It is very important that we take that. Then I would like to move into the more specific case of the letters of appraisals that you are requested to submit through third parties you invite to do so in support of your funding proposals. This would be the more specific point I would like to talk about. I would like to review with you the features, requirements, and contents of these letters. There is much you can do to master what other people write. Then I would like to turn to a different aspect of these appraisal letters, who to turn to ask for a reference, for a letter of appraisal. And how do you do that? Lots of strategic mistakes take place. And as a result, this strategic piece either would be weak, incomplete, and in many cases, missing from the file, leading basically to delays in its adjudication. And finally, I want us to take the first 3 points and think how, by thinking through the letters of appraisal, we can actually have a better control of our own funding proposals to make them more likely to succeed in the competition for resources. And then I would like to open it up for conversations. So I would like to start with a letter. What is a letter? What does it stand for? And what does it do? This first part is rather a sociological thing. It is not something that you will find explained in the process of application. But I thought it is very important to sensitize everyone to what the letter is supposed to do within the realm of these committees. First, letters are documents. It's obvious, it seems. But they are also a mode of communication. Somebody is saying something about someone or an idea and conveying information. Letters are also a social institution, like it's a mode of communication. Particularly in academic settings, letters play a big role in determining the outcomes of adjudication and of hiring. Letters, you should remember, are also forms of social and cultural capital. Who writes the letter for you? Who are your networks? They will never tell you that. That is my sociological analysis of the obviousness of letters. What kinds of cultural capital do you bring with you to this competition? What is the intellectual worth and the worth of your social networks that are not really immediately visible through the proposal, but would be made visible through the identity of those you invite to write the letters? Letters can do a lot of things. They can attest, that means certify facts. They endorse, that means they say, this is important, they approve it, they support it or not. They witness and they vouch in the sense they provide a guarantee. For example, I have no doubt that this person is well positioned to do that study. These are very important sentences. And they vouch and witness not just about the value of the idea. In some cases, letters also vouch about somebody's character, skills, and qualities, which is even more important. So it's a judgment about the human person, not just about the idea that they are talking about. And letters also evaluate or assess in the sense that they determine how valuable, or what we will use the term, how significant, how worthy, how meritorious, meriting is the ideas, are the ideas discussed by this person and the person themselves. So as you see from this first slide, a letter is everything but a neutral document. And it carries with it, beyond the contents, lots of symbols that work on the head of the people who read that letter. If it's written on a letterhead, now listen to me because you will be surprised that I'm mentioning this. But actually, let me tell you, letterhead papers printed versus somebody has scribbled because they didn't have time, a handwritten note on a A4 or whatever letter and send it. And it's difficult to read. So letters or these letters that we use for all kinds of purposes carry with them lots of significance about who you are, what you do, what you can do, how respected you are in your community, how valuable other people think are your ideas, and how much is your social credit. If you are reputed, you are known to be this, you are known to be really attentive to detail, you are known to read a lot, you are known to be a people's person and so forth, or not, etc., etc., etc. And hence, we should understand what I would argue is, to my mind, I wouldn't have gone this way, but this is where we are. I want us to understand the absolutely crucial role that letters in their kinds do to our lives as students, as faculty, as people who are looking for all kinds of opportunities. I would like to concentrate most definitely and mention there are many different kinds of letters, but I want to distinguish between two principal types of letters. And believe me, a large proportion of people and faculty would confuse between them, would not really understand which is which and what is required from them. And I was too a lot ignorant until I came on these committees that Yotam mentioned, the awards committees, the PhD committee, and so forth, to start to understand that all letters, when you are requested to write, to have a letter written for you, or sometimes up to 3 letters, not just one, letters differ. The most frequent mistake is that all these letters of different kinds are normally referred to by everybody simply as letters of reference. And it is a misleading appellation. It is a misleading name. And once you take care to choose the proper words and explain to the person you invite what you want to be done with the proper name of that letter, I think they would understand much better what job they need to do. So I want to focus on two types of letter. The first one is the simple one that we use, is the letter of reference. It is a recommendation. Normally, if you want to enter a position, if you want to be admitted to a program, normally you will be asked for up to 3 letters. But what that letter contains, it is not just about your ideas, your value as a thinker. It's also about your qualities, personal qualities, temperament, character, merit, attributes, skills, achievements, etc., etc., etc. Personal information. And most importantly, that will be a very important point compared to the next one, that a letter of reference for that purpose, for these purposes, must be written by somebody who can start by saying how they know you. Oh, we lived in the same street 25 years ago, and then they go about talking. That is not a person who is positioned to speak to or provide any concrete examples of your qualities, merit, attributes, skills, and character. So when you have these kinds of letters, you need to really choose judiciously somebody who can say, I knew this person as their employer, as their supervisor, as their committee member, as their instructor, and so forth and so forth. So whatever they say is based on their direct, absolutely direct personal impression, experience with that person. And most importantly, I italicized, these letters require that they include concrete example. It needs to give concreteness to your application, to provide concrete examples, not just, it's the best person, and then I can reproduce it for 7 billion people. No, it must be personal with concrete examples. Now, I would like to turn to the second type, on which we are going actually to talk in detail, but I wanted to distinguish these two types, is the letter of appraisal. These are the letters, or this is the letter that you are requested to ask somebody to write as part of your seeking of research funding. And this research funding is either for the affiliate awards, Shirk award to their kinds, or any award that you are applying for. Now, pay attention how different these letters are. First, you need to ask somebody, or the person who writes that letter must be an expert in the broad domain in which you are writing. And they must review and evaluate whatever you propose. It's different. Because there is no personal, he needs or she needs, they need to judge the value of the idea, the coherence of the idea. Secondly, that letter of appraisal, which reviews a proposal, reviews it and evaluates it, must also endorse it. If they don't endorse it, it wouldn't work. Even if they say whatever they say, oh, she wants to do this, but they don't say that they are endorsing it. For the committee, I will develop that later, it means that actually it's a nice thing, but actually for all kinds of reasons, it's not practical. It's not something I would fund. They need to endorse it. And they need to endorse it in a very specific way. They need to endorse it by saying not just how valuable the idea is, but that the person making that idea, putting it forward, is well prepared in terms of knowledge and experience to execute whatever they propose. Say if I came, you know me enough time, most of you, and now all of you know me. If I came with a proposal to the National Ballet Academy of Canada, and I made a proposal about introducing some reforms about ballet dancing, I am not sure I will go beyond the submission stage. You see what I'm trying to say? You need to work it carefully for the simple reason I might put on paper an excellent idea. And actually I have in terms of dance. For the simple reason that I have seen my wife dancing. She's a dancer in among things she does. So I know a lot because I attended lots of performances. But I myself have no experience, no prior experience, no knowledge, no preparation to execute anything to do with dance. And the two things go together. For you, this is important because that means you need to choose a topic, an idea, a domain where you can show a fit between what you propose and what your experience leads you to do. Major criteria that I will talk to later. And the third point is the most important. Remember what I said about who writes the letters of reference. Now, carefully look about the letter of appraisal. It's written by somebody who is well positioned to speak and provide concrete examples of the substantive value, significance, and contributions of the proposal. And actually, as you will see in the form I also sent with my PowerPoint, they are explicitly told, do not speak about the person unless it is directly related to the proposal. So the personal subjective side aspect remains a little bit out, but you need to show a degree of fit between what you are proposing and how what you have done so far in your history prepares you to do, to undertake, to complete successfully. So basically, letters of reference and letters of appraisal are completely different domains. And I would like to say it is very important that people in their mind understand that. And I hope that the next slides, which focus exactly just on the letters of appraisal for funding, will make even more clear how important they are. I want to move to the letters of appraisal now. And I want to talk about two aspects of them. First, I want to talk about the requirements and the contents and the requirements. And then in the next slide, about the features and slides and the style. Now, you would think that what is being said in a letter of reference is out of your control. I would like to say that what is going to be written in a letter of appraisal is not out of your control. Is not. And I will try to show you that. But for that, first, let's see what the funding authorities, in this case, as the slide shows, the shirk institution, asks from the persons who are writing these letters. First, they want to know what is the author's view of the feasibility and focus of the project. Feasibility, I insist. And the objectives, the clarity of the objectives. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. If you now bear with me, you will see where I'm going with this. The second one, look how important. Exactly that degree of fit I was talking about. Whether the candidate has the relevant training, skills, and knowledge and experience to actually undertake it. The ballet example I gave. And third is the contributions, what I called before significance. The significance and relevance. So first you had focus, degree of fit with your own cursus, and then significance. Three criteria keep them in mind, because we will go back to what does it mean for me when I write a research proposal, and how does the committee look, or the committee members look, on these letters. So these three, the first three, are very important. The first four on the slide. This is verbatim, and it's almost with very little variations between all institutions. Now look at the last four. Whether the candidate has critical thinking. They're all variation when they say whether they think critically, originally, have initiative, autonomy, enthusiasm. Basically, it's how much you are invested in that research proposal. And then the ability to communicate clearly. That's a question about style. The ability to communicate your ideas to others is not just that you have wonderful ideas when you speak. Are you able to write them? Is your style conducive of these ideas? And finally, that is only in certain cases, if applicable, if you have proficiency in other forms of capital required for this. For example, I want to do a study on Korean women. Do I know Korean? Do I have any experience of Korea? That's already important. I want to do it on Vancouverite, on farming. Am I aware what a farm is, not is? What kind of prior knowledge do I have of this phenomenon, etc.? And look, the note below. This is what I was saying in a letter of appraisal. They actually say that reference to an actual lived experience of the applicant can be included if mentioned in the research proposal. That means to say, under normal conditions, it will be, if you want, it should be a pure judgment of the idea and the proposal in relation to that set. It has nothing to do how nice you are, how polite you are, how gentleman you or gentlewoman you are, how kind you are to your people. That has nothing to do with it. These requirements are not abstractions. As I will show in the subsequent slides, it is very important that you use these points as a checklist to ensure that in your proposal, these aspects are made manifest. For two people, for the author who is going to write it, because normally they will not write something they don't see. Perhaps in the Q&A, I could explain why they are likely not to do that. And secondly, for the member of the committee who is going to read the letter, it's very important that what is written in the letter corresponds to what is in the proposal. But if the committee member reads the proposal and then somebody offhand just wrote a superlative letter and send it out, that's done. You killed the proposal. Basically, you can kill any proposal just by being superlative and without concrete examples. So you will say to some, yes, I'll write you a fantastic example. Basically, you've given that proposal the kiss of death. I will get back to that point because that has implications for who you call on to write these letters. Sometimes you will do this offhand without realizing the consequences of what we are doing. So this is about contents and requirements, but there is more to it, about features and style. This one is about the author of the letter. This one you should take as a template to determine who you are going to invite. If you know the person is not really accurate, fair, clear, and balanced, they like you too much, perhaps it's not the best one to choose. If they know you mostly on personal issues, on personal level, perhaps it's not the best thing to do. Like, for example, if you choose somebody who is very worthy, but actually he thinks of you, and I'm not inventing, believe me, at this stage, nearing the expiry date of my life, I can tell you a few things about it, and you will know in due course a lot. But I have seen somebody writing, he is a good friend of mine. Avoid being unduly personal. Once you've said that you are friends, you've killed it. The simple word friend is finished. I've seen it with my own eyes. Rather, the evaluation and assessment must support, provide examples why this proposal has quality, has a degree of fit with your experience, and what is its significance. And most importantly, if you look at bullet point 5, that the person writing the letter has actually carefully looked at the selection criteria. Many people write a letter without really looking. They look at the proposal and they write whatever they think is going to be important in the letter, but they don't actually read the selection criteria. It is very important, not just you, but that the person you invite to write these letters, that they read the selection criteria. And of course, that you have a person who is discreet, does not go around telling, oh, I read this thing from so-and-so, it's this, that, that. It's a person who can be discreet and unbiased. That is a requirement. So these two slides, the first one about contents and requirements, and this slide are very important, because the first one means you need to write and know how to write your proposal in a way that aligns with these requirements. If you don't read them, check on them, use them as a checklist. Is my proposal focused? Is it feasible? Is the significance and objectives, are they clear? Did I show that it corresponds to my experience? Do I show that I have all the required knowledge to do it? And so forth and so forth. Is it critical? Is it original? And if so, in which way is it original? If I don't show that in my writing, then the author of the letter is not likely to pick it up, and the committee members who read it are not likely to think of it too much. Secondly, the second one is about the person you invite. Often we go to the people we feel most comfortable with, and that's natural. What I'm trying to say, they're not always the best for you. Because if you remember my first slide about what is a letter, you need a person who really takes the time to read it and to discuss it in a balanced way. They can use superlatives, like it's an outstanding example of good research because, and they provide an absolutely clear reason or example, concrete example, and they have read the criteria. So there are things that need to be done by you about the contents. You can determine the context, you can determine the contents of the letter of appraisal by actually making sure that your proposal clearly exhibits all these points. As simple as that. And you can determine the extent of the compelling case this person will make by carefully choosing the person you invite to write, and not doing it, as I will explain, at the last minute. How does it look like? Here is a standard form, and it is very important for me to show you this. I hope it will be clear in a minute. This is a form used at UBC by the affiliated fellowships applications, but it is the same with a minor change here there for the SHIRK applications, master, doctoral, etc. Look at the bottom line, the long square there. It can take only 2,500 characters. That's what it can take. Nothing will go beyond 2,500 characters. And in 2,500 characters, the author of that letter must do all of these things in terms of contents. Imagine if you don't help them, they will not be able to do it. They will focus on one thing and go rambling about it to fill that space because they promised you a letter, but it will not work actually. So there is a lot you can do if you make sure that in your letter you've addressed focus, feasibility, significance, you're fit with it, the originality of the idea, a clear style, short sentences, proper syntax, and so forth. Then, then they will have actually what they need to put there, because for each one of these criteria that I showed you before, probably they would have just 1 or 2 sentences to put there. And nothing will be printed beyond the 2,500 words. So you see now how the investment in the document of the proposal is so important, the 2 pages in most cases that you need to submit. How important it is to have on these 2 pages all the information required, clearly exhibited for them to see it and speak to it. And you see here, I've put for you where the arrow, blue arrow on the light, for the affiliated award, it's almost a copy paste they took from the SHIRK document. It's predictable. It's not a mystery. There is nothing mysterious. See, it's almost the same. But just the title, because it's a different category, they call it Affiliated Fellowship Awards. It appears on a form that is titled differently, but it's exactly the same, like the SHIRK, like the different kinds of things. It's the same. It doesn't matter what you are applying for funding, which fund is it going to. These things are very, very important. Now, I want to move to the next point. How do you request a letter of appraisal? So I divided into 2 parts. On the left, who do you turn to? And on the right, how do you form contact with that author? Very important. First and foremost, be aware of the number of letters, how many letters you need. Sometimes you need 3, sometimes you need 1. You don't want to discover at the 90th minute that you need 2 more, or you have to ask too much. Because these letters go directly to the adjudicating committee. And suddenly they receive 3 letters and there would be confusion. You should avoid confusion. It's not a good impression. Secondly, of course, if you are working with a supervisor, it is the most, I would say, natural thing. It would be a little bit, I would say, weird if your supervisor is totally absent, because the committee will assume, I'm telling you seriously, that the supervisor is the best placed person to speak to your, to assess this, this proposal. So if it is not the supervisor, or assuming the supervisor has extraordinary circumstances, nobody on your committee, a lot of questions start to emerge. Lots. Most importantly, it is very important that the person who writes and you turn to write the letter really is knowledgeable of the area, of the topic, of the theme, can speak to it by using the proper terminologies, by saying something clear about the significance for that field. If the person is coming from history, or for some other field, and is giving judgment on something which is clearly outside their expertise, they will take it in a particular way. Now, how do we approach the authors? First and foremost, start by reading the application protocol and the requirement, the document I just showed you. Become aware of the deadlines. The last thing you want to do is to go to that person at the 90th minute, and believe me, it happens every year in most cases. I hope I convinced you that it needs a lot of thinking about how to write letters. And suddenly you show up in somebody's world, and God knows what they are doing, or even not doing, what they are passing through, and you're saying, write me a letter, and they need now to start activating their cells, brain cells. They need to write something. They need to fill it. They need to look at the criteria. They need to look at all kinds of things. And you gave them 2 days and you're saying, I'm sorry. It doesn't help. So respect the deadlines. And to do that, my suggestion is that you work in advance, backward. You do not apply at the last minute. You start by inquiring with several people well in advance, 3-4 months, 1 term in advance at least. You alert them that something is going to come. First, you just try to inquire whether they would be ready to do it. If they do, tell them by which date you will send them everything and commit by that. Perhaps they will tell you that at this date I will be abroad, I will not be available. It's very important you converse with that person about the circumstances. Perhaps they are excellent, but they happen to be taken during the term, they are absent, they have all kinds of things happening, they will not be available. And I would encourage you to arrange for a preliminary meeting. It could be an online meeting, a face-to-face meeting, but have a meeting, explain what you are doing. But most importantly, don't just tell somebody you want a letter of reference. Prepare your CV. Have your CV written. You remember, one of the criteria was the degree of fit of your own experience with the proposal. Where are they going to bring it from? You will tell them, they might forget, and they might not remember exactly what you said. A CV details all of these things. Simply by looking at a CV, they can see exactly what you've been doing. They will find a way to translate that, how they think that this exactly aligns with your proposal. Publications, research experiences, you've worked with groups, you've done all kinds of things, you've taken certain courses, you've been in certain projects, you've done certain work at the level of the community. All of that shows up in your reference, in your CV. That is a very important source of information. For me, it's crucial. If you don't supply that CV and a well aligned CV, where do you want them to be? Oh, he knows me, I was in their class. It's true. But you see, sometimes I need to know more than just I was in your class. What did you do, etc. In those cases that people provided me with a CV, I can tell you honestly, I can write better letters. Because I always find something in the CV to bring as evidence of the degree of fit. Evidence, concrete. Here, she has done this, that. And that corresponds to this. This will be foundational for her or him to be able to execute that part of the proposal. CV. And of course, you provide that person, if they accept, if they're available, the proposal. Perhaps also, if you have any, a sample of writing. If you have it, but the most two important document, CV and proposal. And of course, any relevant document as applicable. So it requires preparation. You don't leave that for the last minute. Now, what is the implication of all of this for you in terms of how you write your proposal? And that's the most important one I would like to focus on now. And I will pick everything we said so far and speak to it. So how to ensure the quality of a letter of appraisal? If you follow my argument, there is a lot you can do, a lot. You start writing your proposal first by actually reading carefully the requirements. Because the requirements for appraisal that the author that you invite must write basically are the base for the criteria that the committee will be looking at. So start by reading them. Secondly, once you have a proposal draft, take that list. I put it again, it's the same on the right of that slide. Take them, the focus, feasibility, significance, degree of fit with experience, and so forth, and use them as a checklist to go through your proposal. This is a template, basically, that the committee is looking at. And you can actually take that text on the right-hand side and build a table, put it on the table, start reading, and fill it. And then you will map the quality of your proposal as best you can, but it will already give you a simple tool that you built to check if things are or are absent or are not absent in your proposal, or perhaps you can write, it's there, but not convincing. It's there, but needs re-articulation. It needs a better connection. It needs that. And then that would help you to revise. So don't forget these criteria. This is what I call the compatibility and correspondence between the appraisal emphasis, which are on the right, and your proposal. So you can do a lot. Because once you ensure it this way, the letter writer would find it and will do it. And then the committee member will find it and read it and will see the correspondence. You are making tangible for them the criteria, how they manifest through your proposal. It is on that basis of this text on the right-hand side that you judge the coherence and the flow of your proposal. If things are disjointed, for example, you come to the significance of the contributions of your study only at the very, very end in a small sentence. So it's there, but it should appear early on. As you can see here in this text, the significance appears almost as the third or fourth bullet point. Make sure it is visible to the same extent. Questions of style, clarity, punctuation, referencing, and formatting are important. Like they will tell you, no more than 2 pages, plus 1 or 2 pages, or 6 pages, or 5 pages, depending of references. Abide by these rules. They're arbitrary, but that's how things are. So what can you do with all of this? First, ensure the focus, the clarity of the focus of your research. This is a template. You can build a table and you can use it as a tool to check on your proposal. And here is a suggestion. I didn't write here, but I have it in my written notes. Give that table that you are producing to a peer or to a faculty member, your supervisor. Tell him or tell them, you know, here is my proposal. I've been working on it. Here is what the criteria are. If you could, please read it and fill in your assessment of each of the points, how much it's really holding or not, disjointed or coherent. Is it flowing or not? So you can use that template for you, and you can give it to somebody else. Among your peers, you can do. I mean, Yotam was saying, you know, we are writing together. That could be a session for that. Everybody brings their proposal, and the template is the same for everybody. And we change the proposal among ourselves, and each one spends half an hour to just read critically and fill the template. And then you hand it back. And you can say your mind, you can discuss it, everybody will gain from that. So this template that is just the summary points of the criteria can be used by you directly, and then you can expand it to peers and ultimately your supervisor. I don't see why they wouldn't do it. They should be actually happy to do it. That will be a very tangible way in which you actually document the feedback. Oh, it's very good, you know, go ahead, just clarify this point here, this point there. It doesn't work like this. Forget it. It's very kind, but it doesn't work. In this way, you are pushing yourself and you are pushing the other to be specific in their feedback, because this is how it plays in the committee. And quite frankly, you are doing, everybody is doing everybody else a service by actually learning to educate everybody about how best to look at a proposal. So that's a humble idea I give you, which doesn't require any kind of intelligence to come up with. Just take these criteria, factor them in as a table, check on yourself, revise, and then have others do the same. Once you've given it twice or 3 times, say you've done it yourself, you've given it to your supervisor and to 1 or 2 peers. If the same points of feedback are coming back again and again from all these people, obviously you need to sit down and think about it. It's already quite a clear message. Something is missing there. And it's not just somebody saying, oh, address this, or it's, no, it's written on a piece of paper. You have to sit down and look through it and go through your text and try to become a stranger looking at your own text. So this for me is crucial that you do it. These are elements, all of them from the quality criteria. I just put them there. I will signal 2 of them. The third before the end, the ethical awareness. Because of the small space, many people forget to put, to refer to anything to do with ethics, or they do it perfunctorily. Like they would say, I will grant attention to ethical. Name the ethical issue. Name them, even if they are potential, but just name them. And perhaps you can, if you have time, space, etc., you can even say how you will engage them. I got once a proposal, somebody wanted to do a study about street corner gangs. And I said, how are you going to collect your material? Oh, I'm told, I know where they gather. They gather at the corner of a building, and I will go there and I will drop a microphone where they stand. I will record everything and I will analyze it. My response would have been, I said, it's very interesting, but you need to think otherwise. But basically, don't bother to do anything and not write it if this is what you're going to get forward. Because obviously you've not thought about, you've not given any thought to the ethical issues there. So that's an extreme case. But another extreme case is to say, I will deal in due course with the ethical issue. The question that the committee would ask, are you really, do you really need to wait until you do the thing to consider the ethical issues? Or ethical issues, are they something that can trigger your thinking even before you do it, so you don't harm anybody as you do things? Very important. And the final one, assets. That's the assets, the experience and the languages and the knowledge of the place. You must find a way to show the committee that you have those assets pertinent to this focus, to this research. And they need to be documented in the CV. I spent 5 years teaching this, doing that, and it doesn't show in your CV. So now Do we believe you or do we not? That's it, basically. I'll stop here. Actually, it's 1:28. I overdid myself 2 minutes before time. It's a first. And I'll open it to any comments and questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. This was wonderful.
Yeah, most welcome.
Go ahead. Do you have any questions? Feel free to jump in. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to ask if it's like like can we like see what the person has written for us, or is it like a very personal document we're not allowed to see it?
No, stop screen sharing has stopped. Yes, fantastic. So is it Blessing, right?
Yeah, Blessing.
Yeah. Yeah, so no. And that's why the letters of appraisal, it is so important that you attend the matters I signaled, because you have no way. That the norm is that this letter is a private, confidential submission of the person directly to the committee. There is no way for you to see it. There should be no way. I have never shared a letter of reference, even though I did do my best to write the most supportive, but it's not really supposed to go to the student. Like if it went, even if it was all positive and it went to the student and they came to know about it, that's improper disclosure. Because they want to make sure that the reader, as I said, assessed and evaluated this thing without any pressure. So you will not see it. And because you do not see it, I was suggesting what I suggested today is that you look clearly at the criteria and you make sure that they show up in your proposal in a clear, tangible way. Because otherwise, they will fill the 2,500 characters. But then they would have to be inventive just to get through this. And of course, the worst part of it, they don't have enough to write the 25 and they just fill half of it. So they don't cover everything. They just perform it because they need to finish with it. Quite frankly, I must say, Blessing, because your question is really important. In my life, I've seen only 2 cases where somebody was asked to write letters, one of appraisal, one of reference, and wrote damning negative letters. Only two cases. That means to say, from this we learn that most people you will invite to write your letters really take this seriously and decently. So just help them by providing the documents properly and providing them the evidence properly. And the preliminary meeting, you can explain yourself more. You help them enter the mood of the proposal and then let them do their job.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And sorry, I was also going to get a clarification about letter of reference and letter of approval. So did you say something like letter of approval? You don't actually get to write much about the person, or maybe even at all, but about the project that the person wants to carry out.
Yes. So yes, this is thank you, Blessing. This is a major difference between a letter of reference, say for hiring to a job or to apply for a program of study, and between a letter of appraisal. A letter of appraisal for research funding, in the first priority of things, needs to establish whether the person coming forward with this proposal asking for money can or cannot do it. Can do it because they know the literature, they have a valid, legitimately clearly carved out focus and objectives, it's feasible, and they have the experience and the skills to do it. No other stuff. Now, when, but let me just actually complete it. When would the letter of appraisal contain private information? For example, as you know, Blessing, if you want to do a study, and it's always recommended we do that in any study, but we position ourselves, you know, for example, we are talking about racism, racialization, inequities, poverty, etc. And you're saying something like, and I'm now inventing, speculating, the person who writes the proposal saying, as a person who has grown up in a context of extreme poverty and racism, etc., etc., I have come to identify this aspect early on in my life. And now this is what I want to do with it. Okay, so you've put something from yourself into that proposal. In that case, the writer of the proposal can say something about the relevance of this experience in terms of its implication for the manageability of your project. So they will write something about it. But if you didn't touch on it, they wouldn't say anything. They wouldn't say, she's been in my class, she's taken 95, so she's been a wonderful person, she helps everybody. It's completely irrelevant because with 2,500 words, this is going to take out space for other things that the committee is looking for. So I don't know if it clarified, but that's the point.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
As the moderator, I will use my privilege to ask a question. I have two questions that are actually about a similar topic, which is getting a letter of appraisal from people who are either outside of the institution or outside of the field that we are in. So for those two groups of possible letter writers, I wonder, A, if there is a problem with what you mentioned about social capital, if because they're outside of the field or outside of the institution, their social capital will not be considered as much as, say, people from the institution in the field. And B, how do we mitigate their, and this goes more to a geographical otherness, how do we mitigate the potential writers' lack of knowledge about a specific funding opportunity? So if I ask for someone from a different country in a different academic system to write a letter of appraisal for a Canadian system, they would have a different conception of what the letter is, what it might do, what are the requirements around it. How do I mitigate those differences?
These are two great issues, actually, very important ones. So let's take the time to talk about them. Actually, it's the case for many of us. Now with the internationalization, and especially our PhD program, most of the students are not from Canada. So their prior graduate studies are from elsewhere. So it's a very relevant one. So let me just take it piece by piece because there are different pieces there. There is no problem if somebody is from outside the institution. So they could be from outside the institution, but they could be still known, or they could have an expertise in the field. So they could be from outside the institution. That in itself is no disqualifier. And of course, the more so if they have their own standing and status in the field, it's even better because, as I said, these letters are forms of capital that you mobilize to emphasize the contribution of this project. So that in itself is no problem. Where the problem starts to emerge is if the person you're inviting is not really somebody who is familiar with the field. Because then the first question they will ask is, the committee would ask is he really in a position to judge? Because it's an evaluation. Is I asking a professor of philosophy, of speculative philosophy, to go and evaluate the worth of a house? They will tell you what kind of, I mean, they would have great ideas, but how realistic it is. Yeah, so that's very important. But still, it's no disqualifier because there is a way out of it. There is a way out of it. If that person can show how the field in which they work will benefit as part of the significance of the study from that research, this would really open up my field, which is X, to all these beautiful, great things. Then that would be taken as an assessment, which is based in this thing, because he's saying it might be something already done elsewhere, but it's disconnected, and this guy is going actually to bring into contact, into conversation, two fields that remain completely disconnected. That's the way to do it. And that, absolutely, they are, say, if they are a geographer or a sociologist, and they're telling you, in my field, there is no such thing, and assume that it is true, then it's a valid judgment. And they are telling you, if this happens, there would be all these opportunities. So that they are outside of the field, it is not a disqualifier, but they need to be careful how they articulate their judgment. And you need, perhaps, because you are aware they are not from the field, in a conversation with them a little bit to make them more sensitive to that dimension in a way that actually brings more support to your proposal, because they can make a judgment on how valuable this is for them, for their field. Now there is the third part about people who are positioned in academic institutions or traditions that differ significantly from the ones, say, we are experiencing in Canada with the fundings, shirk, Merck, and whatnot, right? Yeah, it's not an it's something. It's very important to keep in mind, but it's not a barrier. If you take the time to explain to these people, to provide them with the document, to explain to them, perhaps even give them this video, if they have time to read, to get a knowledge, then they might do it well. But this is the most crucial one. I'll tell you why, if you allow me just to develop this idea, and I'll say why. When I talked about actually, let's put it this way. In the committees I've been on, there were very valid proposals, and then 2 lines by somebody. I have no doubt that they can execute this program, literally. And quite frankly, it is coming from universities outside the sphere of North America and outside the sphere of Western Europe, for example, and Australia. Perhaps, and I went into this, I wrote back, but as an exercise, as chair committee, I wrote back to them. What do you mean? What leads you to believe, etc.? Apparently, in some cases, in some cultures, it is enough that they tell you this in their capacity as professors, that it carries weight. They don't need to go into the argument. But you see now that these people, the candidates who have these letters, are at a significant disadvantage compared to other people. This is why I was not very successful, but we went into that direction. I have a document, actually. It is so important, and students need, all of you need to be active to ask all these committees, MA committee, PhD committee, research committees, to publish online detailed document what is the letter of reference, what it should contain. I did one for the PhD in 2008, and it is there. It details, like, to the most mundane details, precisely for these people who don't know, so they will not write it, because all the student will say, the candidate will say, oh, I need that letter, just write it. And they, okay, he's great, he was the best in my class, he's the best in the country. So it's not a barrier if you explain. And also there is a job for the department, in our department in that case, to make sure that equity prevails by putting out on the internet downloadable documents that these candidates can go to, download, or direct the attention of their letter writers to, so that they can be clear what they need to write. But they need to ensure that their writers know it. So geography, field, and different location, they can be a challenge, but they are not insurmountable. Right? Being outside of the institution per se is not a challenge. Actually, if you can show that actually it's arm's length, you never met, and the guy, for some reason, you met him in a conference and he's ready to look at it. I don't know, you met Einstein and he's ready to do something about it. Huh? It carries weight. So in itself is not, but the other two, the first one about field requires the person to be creative, how they actually can formulate their judgment to show that they are positioned in a way to state the case. And the third one, you need to do something as a candidate to ensure that the writer knows what this letter is about, that they just don't write it. You know, it's a pity that for matters of privacy, we cannot show some of these things, but there is definitely a short video to be done, I think, and work to be done just to alert people, you know, when you're asking, you know, just make sure you explain, you educate, you do this, etc. And so there are challenges, but not unsurmountable. They can be surmounted, but it needs your investment. And you know, academic cultures are very, very different. In some institutions, they don't have the institution of letters of reference. They don't require letters from no one. In other places, they don't even require you, if you want to apply, you appear for an interview. So now you would tell me this has pluses and minuses, but this is where we are now. So there needs to be, and I think with the internationalization happening, there needs to be initiatives within institutions and within student movement to educate people how they can, you know, negotiate these differences, because they can be detrimental and they can lead to inequitable outcomes in adjudication. Absolutely. So I don't know if I clarified, but that's the case basically.
Well, that was great. Thank you. Itamar, it seems you have a question.
Yeah, thank you, first of all, Andre, for this very detailed and useful and I think necessary presentations, because it highlights the things that we kind of take for granted. At least I did. So this is very, very good thinking opportunity. I was wondering if you could talk, maybe this is outside of the scope of our conversation. I'm still curious. I'm going to ask. So the framework that you gave seems to sort of, and rightly so, kind of revolve around like our capacity of PhD students or graduate students, kind of applying for the types of funding and scholarships that we need to as graduate students, in the MA level or PhD level, or the application for a program. I was wondering if you could talk maybe a little bit about what lies ahead, because at some point, hopefully we're going to graduate and maybe maybe apply for funding for some project as researchers or something like that, and specifically with the context of a letter of appraisal, not so much the reference letter, which I think I have more experience with, but as a kind of, you know, independent researcher or a researcher within a position that you want to apply for funding first, like, does it change? How do you go about choosing, for example, the people who write the letter of appraisal? What changes from the level of student to the level of researcher in general? If you could talk about it in general lines.
Yeah, absolutely. That's important. But just to clarify, I was talking to Susan Porter the other day, the vice provost. She wrote several chapters that are very, very interesting, actually. And she was saying that her data suggests that less than 25% of graduate students who graduate, PhD, MA, these days go to academic positions. So less than 25. And the PhD and the MA, certainly the PhD, has become actually less and less linked to academic trajectories. Most people who will graduate, the 75%, according to our statistics, who graduate with a PhD will not really go into this, will go into the private sector, NGOs, third sector, whatever it is, public service, etc., etc. So that's just to put it in perspective. Now to go to your point, absolutely. Absolutely. So if I understood you well, you're asking about, you're asking about, you just changed place on the screen because somebody opted out, but that was blessing. She apologized. Anyway, to go back to it, you are asking the question about how would I do it, the letters of reference, if I'm not a graduate student, say I have graduated, I have my PhD already, I'm looking for a position and I need to get some funding and prove that I'm worthy in a way, right? Okay. So that's a big question, but I will answer it happily. First, you don't do it alone. You could, but you don't do it alone. You could do it alone, but you know, this is where choosing the kind of funding you're applying to becomes important. And there are types of funding that, and this is my personal opinion, of course, but types of funding which can show that as an emergent scholar, you are well positioned within the relevant networks of your discipline and area. And there are different fundings that actually are there for the purpose of this kind of collaboration. If you ask me, I would go first for these kinds of things, because there might be in that collaboration some people who have already had significant experience, and in a way you can join that kind of momentum and make your life a little bit easier. So that's one way to go about it. Secondly, in that case as well, I think some people might choose to speak to their supervisors, but you know, sometimes supervisors might also help you connect with their colleagues that they know that they might be more like as a kind of mentorship to push you to connect with people and help you have other people who might be well positioned in the area to write this letter. So to some extent, as a new graduate, yes, it would make sense for me to consult with my supervisor and get a sense who in their networks might be the best person who would write the letter, bring the necessary social and cultural capital, show that I am able to already position myself. I'm recognized. Getting a letter from somebody is recognition, is a form of recognition. So when you go to apply for a job, and you are saying, here is a collaborative project I have with this, and that, and some of the references have been written by leading people in the field, that's already an introduction in the court of the king, if you want, or the queen, or whatever it is. So yes, I would go for collaborative networks, because the collaborative networks mean that the institution who is taking you actually will benefit from that collaboration, will find itself already there. We are not taking a loaner. You know what a loaner is, right? We are not taking like there is a cartoon about this cowboy on his Lucky Look or something like this, you know, loaner in the risk for institutions is much higher these days in a competitive environment. So somebody who show that they are already recognized part of a network, professional network, for them, that would be a signal that this person is really standing on the right platform with the right kind of thing. So these are the things I could speak to in relation to your thing. And you know, the point that you're asking about actually require you to think about very carefully how you cultivate these relationships, because you don't knock on somebody's door, say, hey, I want to be part of your network. That's the cultivation part. That's the strategic part. Absolutely. I mean, we need to be honest about it. Lots of these things we're talking about, perhaps within the department, where the department is also interested to support the student, it might be less problematic to find an appropriate person to write. But in the larger life, these networks are not readily made, and nobody feels the absolute commitment to them. You need to be able to introduce. So your supervisor will, and committee members, your instructors, will play a very important role in terms of helping you step into this context. But it's also up to you in conferences, and basically smaller conferences, not something like huge conferences with tens of thousands of people where you can get lost. And if you're not part of a network, it will not work. Choose the smaller associations where you can be more visible, where you can bring yourself to speak out, where you are more likely to meet people which you can email later and then slowly start. So the cultivation with this strategic outlook is the best thing I could say. So it's your supervisor, the people you've worked with on the committee is one, but it's also where you chose to present your papers. The more you go, you know, I don't want to mention, because this is recorded, I don't want to mention names of associations, but I'm speaking about the big associations. Some people might feel, and I've seen it, some people might find themselves completely isolated. They are in a prestigious conference, annual conference, but one drop among 13 or 16,000 people scattered over 4, 6, or 7 hotels. What is the likelihood for you to be able to contact somebody afterwards and continue that conversation? Whereas there might be in your field smaller associations, actually more interesting, because once they meet, you have more chance to one-on-one. And even it would be better if you are careful that these associations sometime have a journal, and they have an annual award for the best paper of the year. These are very good places to be in. This is a place where you can have your due legitimate space under the sun. But to go to the big ones, unless you have already Einstein with you or somebody of that caliber, it's very difficult to enter. You might feel yourself very isolated. And so this is where the kind of strategic decisions come to be. Early on, the kinds of conferences you go, where you publish, etc. Look for these places where you are more likely to get quality time with the people you confer with. That's my humble opinion. We can speak more about it, but you know, I can tell you the suffering of these big conferences for people who emerge. From time to time is good to do, but if you are talking about the things you are talking about, which has a strategic view in mind, choose places where you can be, you count. And there are, but you need to look for them. Yeah, so sorry, but that's what I can say actually.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeonju, you had some questions. You're most welcome. Yeonju, any questions?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this talk and all the questions. And I realized how I was too naive when I approached this letter things. Yeah, to be honest, I just got to know those significant differences between letter of reference and letter of appraisers. And I really appreciate, yeah, I learned many things. I have just one question, like,
please.
That is related to what Yotam asked. So such as when I apply for one funding and I ask for a letter of appraiser, someone who is not in my department, but the topic can be related. So in that case, I can, as you mentioned, like we can use these differences in a different perspective, which is interdisciplinary contribution or multidisciplinary contribution. So I mentioned this kind of possibility of contribution in my proposal, and I can help my writer, like the referee, who will write down letter of appraiser. So she or he can mention about this interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary contribution. That's my understanding from your suggestion. Is it correct, or you wanna?
So could you give me a small example to illustrate your question?
For
Just
sure.
an example, like a scenario that I can see clearly.
Okay, so I'm interested in Korean millennials' work and life and their life history. So yeah, I am adult education focused scholar, but at the same time, I believe this understanding from my research can make some contribution to Korean studies, which is belonging to Asian studies. Yep. In terms of institutionalized concept, like in UBC, yeah, educational studies under the Faculty of Education, and Asian studies under the Faculty of Arts. Yeah, so those scenarios can be useful. This question.
I think I understand. because the question you're asking is about the how do you show the significance of your study? Basically, that's what I think your question is about. And let me say something about that significance, because it was one of the criteria in all of these funding applications. In most applications, significance is in the singular, like they asked, what is the significance of this study? But you should not fall into the trap of assuming that there is only one significant contribution of a study. There could be many or several or more than one significant contribution of the study. But here is the challenge. You know, I could go on and write significance, ultimately showing how the understanding of Korean millennia generation can help us understand better, for example, the orbiting of the Earth by the moon. I could get there at some point, logically. I don't know. So here is the challenge. When you want to show the significance of your study, indeed, there might be different contribution, not just one. It could be one contribution to the literature. It could be a contribution to an area study. It could be a contribution even in terms of methodology. Don't forget that. People think that the contribution must be restricted to the theoretical aspect of the study, but not at all. Sometimes the contribution could be also methodological because it shows certain potentialities of proceeding that way. Now, so for example, in the question that I've just invented, theoretical area studies, Korean studies, Asian studies, and the methodology. So you have three contributions. I think it will be valuable to show this kind of multiple contributions, but you have to make sure that they are coherent and they really converge and they emerge out of what you have proposed, that they are not disjointed. Oh, it will be this, it will be that, it will be this. You have to write them in a way, you have to capture them in a way that shows that actually they emerge from the same source, but they go for different destinations. If you are able to do it, then I think this will be a valuable testimony to the creativity of your study. Because basically, and here I go back to the point, in a way, it is a different version of the question that Yotam asked. Somebody from outside the field, from outside my academic tradition, even from outside my geography. If you can, for you, it's just the other way side, but the same issue. If you can show that these three contributions are linked and they are going to put three different fields into conversation, that would be a good way to do. If you can show how a study of the millennial generation can help us understand better some theoretical sphere, and at the same time improve our methodology and then understand better some aspect of Asian society. It's very important, absolutely. So there can be more than one contribution for a study.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome. Yep.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Jessica, your last chance, huh? Before we push the buttons.
This is like a reunion.
Yeah, it is.
I'm so happy to see all of you. I miss before pandemic season when you're having in-person interaction and intensive discussion.
Yeah.
You miss that, right?
A lot.
Yeah. I miss it too. You know,
I do too. Yeah.
I'm not the kind. Social relationships are very important, but here we are. Here we are in the center of town. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, Andre, thank you so much. This was really, really important. Yeah.
If there are any aspects that come forward, I'm happy to answer emails, and you could even then put them as PDFs associated. So you know what, my friend, I could here is a new way to do it. When you put up the video, and the documents that I sent you, 2 of them, you could add, if those who watch have questions, they can email. I will respond, copy you. We can compile all of these together and actually add them as resources, because there might be questions that were not asked today. Absolutely. And that would keep the recording to some extent alive.
Mhm.
So keep
Yeah,
it in
that's a good
mind
idea.
as an option.
That's a good idea. Yeah, thank you. That's a really good idea.
Fantastic.
And we're going to need to schedule another session to discuss your ballet reform plan, because I am very interested.
No, oh, can you stop that recording?
Yes, I am doing
Yes,
that right
please.
now.